Turn with me to Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5 and verse 13. We saw Belshazzar had some writing on the wall. We're going to look at the explanation of that this evening. Writing on the wall. Everybody there? Daniel 5, verse 13. Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, "Are you that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judah? I have heard of you." You'd think this guy would have done more than simply have heard of it. This guy was pretty high up in the kingdom affairs, if you will, and he had brought wisdom to the table that was greatly needed. But for some reason, this old boy here, I don't think, thought that he needed any help from anybody. You know, there's a lesson there for all of us when we get to thinking we don't need some wisdom, we don't need some counsel from other folks, or we don't need to seek advice. We can get in trouble pretty fast when we get to thinking too much of ourselves. And that's kind of where old Belshazzar is, it looks like. He said, "I've heard of you that the Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make known to me its interpretation. But they could not give the interpretation of the thing." We've heard this before, hadn't we? "And I have heard of you that you can give interpretations and explain enigmas. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Okay, now he's co-regent with his dad at this point in time, so that's why third, evidently. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, "Let your gifts be for yourself." Now he's not being smart aleck here, but he's also not, just sucking up to the king. He's telling the truth. "Let your gifts be for yourself and give your rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father a kingdom and majesty, glory, and honor. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up. And whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride," that pride's a dangerous thing. Scripture tells us that pride goes before a fall. What that means is the pride precedes the fall. Pride's what causes the fall. That's what causes. I have seen a lot of people in my time that pride took them down. And this is another case of it right here. He was hardened with pride. He was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men and appoints it over whomever he chooses." Now, Daniel just gave this old boy a little history lesson. People that do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And we see that over and over. What do we learn from history? That we don't learn from history. Haven't you seen that over and over? People will try the same thing over and over and expect different results, and it never comes about, which is the definition of that, insanity. So he's giving him a history lesson here that evidently this guy willfully, because it was his grandpa, it wasn't like he was, in some other loop, didn't know anything about this stuff, but he's intentionally put it to the side, didn't remember it on purpose, whatever his reasoning was. And so Daniel gives him a history lesson. Now, This guy had the authority, he had the ability at that point in time to put Daniel to death, whack his head off, or whatever they decided to do. But he goes ahead and he says, "But you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this, and you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven." Not a good idea. See who that is. They have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords, your wives, plural, and your concubines. So they're having an orgy. What's going on here? Have drunk wine from them. In other words, they have desecrated the vessels that were set apart for the use in the house of God. Now, all that's been hauled away from from Jerusalem to Babylon. And you know, the Jews, another aside to this too, prior to them being taken captive for this 70 years, that's how long they were going to be in captivity. But what leads up to this is they said, you know what? We've got the temple of God. The temple. We're safe. That's like, remember the Ark of the Covenant. They were using it as sort of a magic talisman, you know, sort of a token that's going to keep us safe. God didn't need that stuff. That was all a part of them learning to understand who God is. He gave them the law so they could understand Him better, to understand why and where and how He does things, so then they could learn to love Him. Then they could obey Him and get the blessings that He wanted to give them. Nothing's changed. The church today is in the same boat. Sometimes we want things for our comfort and our pleasure rather than going out and doing things the way God would have us to do them, which is giving the gospel out to whomever and wherever. But he says, you knew all this stuff right here. And they've come and you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. You got to carry them around, your little g gods. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the inscription that was written. So, we see sometimes, if you look in the Old Testament, we see the term the finger of God. When you see that term, the finger of God, it's about the power of God. You know, you're talking about, is God's arm shortened or is his strength waned or anything like that? And of course, it has not. Now, here's the inscription. You see, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. Okay, this is Aramaic. You read Aramaic like you would Hebrew. Rather than left to right, you read it right to left. And as Hebrew, it also had no vowels. So the vowels had to be supplied. Now, if you ever see this written out, you would have no clue what that said. And that's why the wise men and astrologers had no clue what it said. So it took a gift from God through one of his people that surrendered to God to give the interpretation of this. And of course, what it means is numbered, weighed, and divided. That's a very literal translation of what that means. Now I'm going to read it down here in my little notes here. The Aramaic word can be a verb, or it can also be a noun. Okay? It means numbered. If it's a noun, it means a mina, which is a unit of money. Daniel read it as a verb instead of a noun. Why? To signify that the length of Belshazzar's reign had been determined by God and was about to come to a screeching halt. It was about to be the end of it. Tekel either can be a verb or a noun. Again, Daniel used it as a verb right here, which means it's weighed. Weighed on the balances. Okay? And it wasn't like this. It was up here. It was found wanting. It wasn't what it needed to be. So that's the meaning of this word here. And he gives the interpretation there in verse 26. Here's the interpretation of each word. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances, found wanting. Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Now, Babylon was well fortified. We talked a little bit the other day about how big the walls were and how great the armament was and the fortress type structure. But the Euphrates River also ran through the middle of Babylon. And they had a certain type of gate structure there. Well, the Medes and Persians, they were pretty crafty people. And so they redirected the stream and went under the gate where the river would normally come, through that sluice, if you will.
I read that. I just couldn't believe that.
Isn't that neat?
Yeah, that's utterly unbelievable.
They went underneath there and came in. And they knew, okay, they already knew that these folks, Herodotus and some other historians log this in their chronicles, that they knew they was in there partying. Now, it's not like Belshazzar didn't know they were out there wanting in. He knew they were out there wanting in. But he was all secure in his prideful ways, and he's we're in, we can't be conquered. We're unconquerable. Anytime a country, a man, or anybody, it's like some people, they say, well, it's going to whoop so and so. I said, really? It might not turn out that way. You can bite off more than you can chew pretty easy sometimes, especially if you get all puffed up and egotistical and become one of those folks that think there's nothing can get the better of you. So that's what's happening right here. Verse 29, then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple, put a chain of gold around his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now this was a short-lived celebration here. That very night, which was October the 12th of 539 BC, according to the historians, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain. Killed him graveyard dead. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom being about 62 years old. There's something about that 62 also that works into the Mena, Tekel, Upharsin. All that works into that. I don't understand all that, but I know the numbering system works into that when he gives. Why would it give his age? He was about 62 years old. Now, you will find people that are critical of the Bible, and I don't mean that in a bad way. They try to find, is there something wrong with it? They say we never proved that this Darius the Mede was around. Well, it wasn't too many years ago they said Belshazzar never existed too. But then they found some cuneiforms and other tablets and things that there he is, and even the date. So I just think they hadn't found old Darius the Mede yet. But there's all sorts of explanations of this, why he's called Darius the Mede, that it's a title, that he's probably Cyrus is actually who it is, all these different things. Some say it's even Gubaru.
Yeah, they said it's like Cyrus was appointed, like he was
right.
Appointed, so.
And it's a title, if you will.
Yeah.
And then there was a general, there's different names for him. One of them is Gubaru. That's who it is. I just think his name was Darius, and they just hadn't figured it out yet. Because I found the Bible to be accurate when the history books are wrong. Because later on, then they come around and say, well, we found this. It's like the Dead Sea Scrolls. And along about 1947, a little shepherd boy was up there, and he lost one of his sheep. And that's a good thing he did, because he threw a rock in a cave, and he heard something broke in there, and he got in there. Long story made endless, they found what we call the Dead Sea Scrolls there in Qumran. And they predated the known manuscripts that we had by over 1,000 years. And guess what? They say the same thing, which shows the veracity of the Bible, shows the truthfulness, and you can take it to the bank of heaven, it'll cash there, of the Bible. Okay. Chapter 6. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps. So we had the head of gold, Babylon, now we're down to silver. Remember that statue? Okay. To be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one. By this time, Daniel was about 82 years of age. Don't know exactly, but if he was about 16 when he went into captivity, this puts him at about 80, 81, 82, 83, somewhere along in there. That's how old he is at this point in time. He's not a boy no more. Okay. The satraps might give account to them so that the king would suffer no loss. Then this Daniel distinguished himself. We as Christians should always distinguish ourselves. We ought to always walk the high road, never the low road. We ought to always do things God's way. We should never let ourselves become angry to the point where we make a fool of ourselves, all that sort of stuff. We don't speak, we don't gossip out of turn. We don't do those things. And he distinguished himself above the governors and satraps. Okay? Because, why? An excellent spirit was in him. I wonder how he got that. From God? And the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. Well, there's going to be some jealousy break out now. So the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no charge or fault. That's what it means to be blameless. Does that mean Daniel was not a sinner? No, he's a sinner. He'll admit that later on. Because he was faithful. Now, he is a stranger in a strange and foreign land. He is not, he's not one of them, and he doesn't try to be one of them. He doesn't try to fit in. He does his own thing God's way. Even though he's taken out at a very young age, he was a teenager, no doubt about that. And yet he is stuck with it through all these years. He was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found in him. Then these men said, we shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. The same thing can be said of us. If there's anything they find wrong with us, it's because we're worshiping God by the way we live, move, and have our being. So these governors and satraps thronged before the king and said thus to him, King Darius, live forever. Let's put some butter on him. All the governors of the kingdom, the administrators, satraps, the counselors, and advisors have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. I guess they kept a den of lions on hand.
Mm-hmm. It was actually common for them too.
Let's just keep a den of lions in case somebody gets out of hand. We'll chuck them in there. Keep them hungry, though. I want their ribs showing at all times. Don't y'all find that neat? Puts me in mind of something Chris said one day. He said something about scripture. We was talking about writing scriptures on the floor of Dan and Christian's creamery. Chris said, I've got one from over there, I think 2 Kings chapter 2 or somewhere along. Remember, Elijah's done gone up, and we got Elisha on the scene. And of course, Elijah went up in the chariot of fire. So he comes along, and these youths come out there, and they said, go up, bald head, go up, bald head. Well, he put a curse on them from God. The next thing you know, what happened, Chris? Some bears come out of the bushes and mauled all 42 of them, wasn't it? A slew of them, passel of them. And I'm like, well, that's just the neatest thing right there to find that in the Bible. We're going to write that on the floor at this creamery. Don't mess with them, the bears will get you. Now, if y'all go to the creamery and y'all see a bear hanging out around there. All right. Verse 8, now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter, it does not pass away. And there's a lot of history writing about that they were sticklers for their law. Therefore, King Darius signed the written decree. Now, when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home and never prayed again, so he wouldn't get in trouble. It doesn't say that. And in his upper room, with his windows open toward Jerusalem. How many of y'all have seen the Lifeway little booklets? It's called Open Windows. That's where that comes from, right there, by the way. The windows were open toward Jerusalem. He knelt down on his knees. Now, there's a position of prayer here. We're going to talk about this a little bit more on this term here. Prayer and your knees and what have you. Talk about that a little bit more Sunday morning, Lord willing. 3 times that day. And prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Now, this is a steadfastness, this is courage, this is true piety, and it's a fidelity, if you will, to God. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying. They knew when he did it. His windows were open. He didn't care who knew. Praying and making supplication before his God. And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. So they answered and said before the king, that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself. What can we learn from this? Don't rush into doing stuff, huh? Think about it, pray about it, maybe consult somebody else. Have you ever signed something you wished you hadn't signed? You ever have buyer's remorse? Huh? And he set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. So he likes Daniel. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Couldn't find any way to get out of this decree that he himself had signed. Then these men approached the king. Here they come thronging again. And they said to the king, know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed. They knew he was trying to, find him a wiggle room. So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. Now, I don't know if he believed it or he was hoping it, but he said it. Then a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signets of his lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. Now the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him. Also his sleep went from him. The king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the den of lions. When he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. He's grieving. The king spoke, saying to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God. I like that. Has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. He's all right. He slept good that night. Had him a nice lion for a pillow. He said, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. Now the king was exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God. Now we've got something else about to happen, don't we? And the king gave the command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions. Them, their children. Yeah, their wives. The lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. And before they ever came to the bottom of the den, they didn't get no food that night. They were real hungry. Then King Darius wrote to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed. Don't ever forget that right there. We live in troubled times, uncertain times. We live in times when people sometimes got the quivers in their liver. They got fear. If you're a Christian, you have no reason to fear. None at all. It's not that something bad won't happen to you here on planet Earth. It might. They may come haul you off, put you in jail for it's said and done. They may execute you. All they're going to do is punch your ticket. Because absent of the body, present with the Lord. So don't fret. His kingdom is the one that shall not be destroyed. His dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues. And he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. A little aside here, when you read through Daniel, Daniel is not written in chronological order.
Oh, yeah.
You figured that out, hadn't you?
I read ahead.
It does this.
Yes.
And you'll find quite a few books in the Bible that'll do that sometimes. And sometimes you'll also read a verse, and the very next verse has, it's got about unlimited amount of time between those two verses, especially in the minor prophets, as they're called. We'll stop there at chapter 7. And if the Lord hadn't come got me or got all of us, we'll resume next Wednesday. Where's my thing?
Thank you very much.